As we all know, David is really one of the creative geniuses of our time. And as Kai mentioned, he's brought his brilliance to music, to the screen, to the stage, to books, and of late to journalism. Certainly, he's a true creative polymath and has challenged and broken conventions in all of those venues, including journalism and on the digital news screen. And that's what we're here to talk about. I'd certainly love to sit here and talk to David for a couple of hours about where he got the inspiration for burning down the house, or what it was like to collaborate with Brian Eno, or why he was talking about eels last week at the Boston Science Museum. But I understand my assignment is to very much talk about reasons to be cheerful. So when we open it up to you for questions, that's your assignment too. Please understand it. And you are supposed to ask him about journalism and not about your favorite album or the concert you went to in '79. So David, you launched Reasons to be Cheerful in August of 2019, just 2 months after you opened American Utopia on Broadway, or 2 months before, I'm sorry. And not only did you establish and organize and hire for this new and innovative website, but you wrote 6 stories that appeared in the original version. So I have 2 questions related to that. First, do you ever sleep? And secondly, in a world where we're all inundated with news and information to just an outrageous level, what made you think we needed another source?
Wow, this is about at least 5 years ago now. And like a lot of us, I'd wake up and read a number of newspapers and magazines and publications, went in my morning coffee and things, and I'd end up feeling frustrated, angry, anxious. The way a lot of news makes us feel, and a lot of the things that are happening in the world make us feel that way. And I realized this was not helping me or the various issues at all. I'd just be kind of my stomach in a knot and kind of angry for a good part of the day. Justifiably so in many cases, but I thought, but this is not really helping. So on an instinct, I started saving things that I read that were kind of hopeful. In the beginning, it was all sorts of things. A music venue that opened that I went to that I thought was really kind of doing exciting things, or news articles or things like that. And lo and behold, after a number of months or maybe a year, I realized I had quite a lot of things like that fit into those categories. I started talking to people, doing little talks that I called Reasons to be Cheerful, as a way of letting people know that there are hopeful things happening in the world, and it tends to get suppressed in some ways. We tend to gravitate towards negative news. We have a negative bias. But I thought, what if we kind of emphasize some of those other things as a kind of therapy for me? So it was very personal at first. And then I realized other people felt the same way. And then I thought, after writing some stuff and posting stuff myself, I thought, let's make it official. Let's formalize it and hire a team. Let's bring people in. Let's raise money. Let's do all that. And yeah, we started off with a small group, and it's grown a little bit, and we're kind of self-sufficient now. I named it after a song by a singer-songwriter named Ian Dury, a British singer-songwriter, and that was he did a song called Reasons to be Cheerful, I think part 2 or something, and it was his reasons to be cheerful were much more personal. But I thought I loved the title, and it was his song came out during the Thatcher era, and it was kind of an antidote in a way, and I thought, I think we need something like that now.
So, as you know, I've been personally involved with the Solutions Journalism Network, which is one of your partners, and I understand and endorse what you're trying to do with the site. But as you also know, one of the biggest challenges for this solutions approach to news is to make sure that it's not just seen as happy news or fluff, that it's unlikely to have an impact and ignores the serious challenges that the world's facing. So how do you ensure against that?
Yeah, this is a big issue. We want to make sure that people know that we're not just telling happy stories. So we have these kind of rules for ourselves. Obviously, the stuff has to be fact-checked and everything like that. But we want to only report on things where there are actual solutions, not just good ideas. There are lots of good ideas out there, and many of them are very important. But we want to report on things where people have actually applied the idea and there is actual evidence and proof that it works, with the idea that if we can make it public, things that have been done that work, solutions that actually work, and there's proof that it works, there's evidence that it works, then maybe other places, this is the dream, other places will read it or find out about it and go, okay, maybe we should try that in our town. Maybe we should try that in our country. And we don't have evidence that that's happened yet, not very much, but that's the dream.
So they have to be replicable, these solutions.
Yes, they have to be replicable.
Can you give us an example or two where stories have actually had an impact, where you've actually seen, all right, we were out there, this journalism was done, somebody else picked up on it, or
wow,
or that they might?
I can do more of them might. One of our most popular stories this year was a story about dam removal. And dam removal is a thing that's kind of gaining popularity. It brings, so the question then is, why is this a good thing? So we have to show that it's a good thing not only because it brings fish back, but then the fish brings a livelihood to the people along a river. So there's an economic benefit that way. There's a recreation benefit. The value of the houses along the river goes up because it's not just a muddy, backed up thing. So it does have a real kind of measurable impact. And it's a story that people liked hearing about. And we wrote about it in Maine, happening in Maine, but it's also happening in California. There's a big removal in California and in Washington State and some other places. So it's a thing that's gaining momentum to remove these dams that were built that no longer have a purpose.
One of the things that's most impressive when you look at the site is the range of geography. This week, it's got features pieces from London, Utah, Zambia, Morocco, and a tiny island off Madagascar. How do you and the staff find these stories? And tell us more about just how the whole operation works.
Okay, how does the operation work? We have yes, a managing editor. We have
who's here, by the way, Will doing.
Will,
yep.
Will, who's doing more of the outreach and marketing. And then we have a team of staff writers. We have web designer people. We have a social media person. And then there's a lot of freelance journalists. We would love to have more of them actually employed, but we're still growing. So that is to come. But those people, they have a little network. The journalists out there, the freelance ones and the ones on staff, they have a network, so they sort of have it, they have an ear for what's happening. And it's kind of amazing. I asked myself the same question. How did you find out about this? Yeah.
What's the business model for Reason to Be Cheerful? Do you personally fund it to some extent, or is it primarily philanthropy? I noticed that you have memberships. How does all that work?
This is so this is kind of important, and it has to do with what the last panel was about how do you sustain journalism, how do you get readers, this kind of thing. We've kind of done a kind of patchwork. So I do kick in some money. A lot of it now comes from membership, which is voluntary. Nobody pays. There's no paywall. We don't take ads. And so it's a nonprofit. So, but people can pay what they wish and be a member and get some little perks. We have donors. We have support from philanthropic foundations. We're doing a benefit kind of variety show in the fall at Town Hall. We do these events like a talk in Maine about the dam removal. It's a whole mishmash of things, and they all feed together to allow us to do this. And we're kind of sustainable doing that, which is kind of amazing.
It is amazing. I'm going to break a little bit, just nudge up against my own restriction here, and talk a little bit about American Utopia. As I mentioned, was launched in the same time period as the site. And in an earlier interview, you said that was like a performance version of Reasons to be Cheerful. Would you talk a little bit more about that and the parallel and where all of your work sort of comes together in that way?
Well, yeah, around the same time that the Reason to be Cheerful was launching, I did a record and then a tour, and then that eventually ended up on Broadway, called American Utopia, which sounds like it might be tongue-in-cheek or ironic, but it was not exactly. It was more to bring a diverse group of musicians together and present it in a way where everybody on stage got the spotlight at some point. That was meant to show this is what we can be, but in an entertaining way, not in a kind of didactic teaching kind of way. So it's the show business thing of show, don't tell. If you want people to really understand something, let them experience it rather than telling them what it wants to be. So I thought, okay, this is a different kind of journalism. We're going to show you by example in this performance how things can be. And you kind of absorb it in a much more emotional, immediate way sometimes than reading about something.
Yeah, that's one of the first things we teach in Journalism 101 is show, don't tell. And get your questions ready. I'll ask one more myself here. Other than Reasons to be Cheerful, what's your own news and information diet? What do you read, watch, listen to on a regular basis?
Oh, boy. I read a few blogs. I read a few blogs that aggregate different things and sometimes have their own writing. But then I also read a lot of kind of mainstream stuff, kind of boring mainstream stuff. The Times, the Washington Post, Financial Times, and a lot of really mainstream news, despite the fact that I know there's a lot of other stuff out there there's a bias and focus in mainstream news that I realize that's there, but I'm still go there as my source.
All right, your turn. Questions, raise your hand.
Thanks. As a Mainer, we really appreciate the dam story. But I work with an organization that supports news organizations all around the world. Do you accept submissions from different news organizations in other countries for your international coverage? There's lots of reasons to be cheerful out there.
Yeah, we do accept submissions. Yeah. We could.
And again, Will Doig is up against the wall there. You're welcome to track him down afterwards. I should mention David needs to rush off right after the session for a recording session. So Will is the person to track down if you want to follow up. Next question.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I have one question, and that is, if you could articulate one specific goal for the publication, something that if you achieved it would make you tremendously cheerful, what would that be?
Okay, there's two goals. One is to, as a kind of therapy, the way it works for me is it's therapeutic to read about people who have found solutions to things. I think one goal is to impart that to a broader public because they need it, we need it, I need it. And the other thing is what I mentioned, that if sometimes someone reads something we've written and then realize this is the solution we need in our community or in our town, and look, they've already done it in Zambia or Italy or Washington State. Why can't we do this in our town? Let's find out how to do it.
Yeah, I want to add a little something to that. My background is mostly in investigative journalism, and one of the things that I've come to realize is that this solutions journalism actually adds a layer of accountability to traditional investigative journalism. If traditional investigative journalism change, it stops at identifying the problem, and then generally journalists have sort of walked away and hope something happens. As we all know, rarely it does. Solutions journalism takes that to another level, and it creates accountability where you can say, no, then the mayor may say, well, nothing can be done about that, or that costs too much money. And with this sort of journalism, you're able to say, no, in fact, they fixed this problem in St. Louis, and here's how they did it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to say, no, yes, there is a solution to this, and it's not me dreaming. These people in St. Louis have done it.
Right. Another question?
A lot of people approach news as an information product. And listening to you, it sounded like you were starting from watching your own emotional reaction to what you were reading. And so I'm curious how you see those two pieces relating to each other or coming together, the kind of emotional experience of the stories and then the informational experience.
Well, that's interesting. Obviously, when I wake up in the morning and I'm reading kind of mainstream news, it is very emotional. There's information, but it's very emotional, and it's usually, the emotion is usually anger or frustration. And I thought, that's a really narrow focus of emotions. And yes, sometimes we can actually achieve things by being angry about it, and maybe that's good. But sometimes we have to feel that there's a possibility, that there is a way of moving forward, and not just think it's horrible out there.
And David, you probably would be encouraged to know that in my school and quite a few others around the country now, we're actually teaching solutions journalism to young people as an approach. And I should mention that the co-founder of Solutions Journalism Network, David Boardman, is also in the audience if you want to learn more about this approach. Next audience question.
It is a little bit of swimming upstream, whatever. Neurologically, whatever you want to call it, we do have a bias towards negative news. We want to be, in order to survive, we want to be aware of the scary thing that's coming in the door or that's behind us or whatever. So we're alert to those things. We're biologically and evolutionary. We've evolved to be aware of scary things.
One thing that studies have shown is that negative news, if you look at traffic, negative news has a really steep but very short-lived traffic pattern, whereas this solutions-oriented news tends to grow over time and is much more widely shared, which is an interesting phenomenon too. Last question.
Hi. Potentially a two-parter. Bouncing off of hearing from the young people earlier who were discussing TikTok and internet, social media being the place where Gen Z is getting their news. Can you tell us why are you so drawn to mainstream news still? Even being such a radical as you are, what attracts you to that? What are the things that are still interesting or important in that format that we should be considering? And how does it make you feel about that transition or the difference between those generations?
That's, maybe we should pass the mic to some of the people who were up here before. I tend to have a little more trust in mainstream journalism. I feel like there's still the idea of fact-checking and at least some kind of lack of bias in mainstream reporting, which may not be true, but I have that perception. Whereas my perception of social media is you can't trust any of it. And it's the business model is to just keep you hooked and feed you advertising. But from what I was hearing from the folks who were up here earlier, that's my biased point of view. That it's also true that probably most people get their news from social media. And so maybe we have to look at a solution to make that source more trustworthy rather than just dismissing it.
So, David, I want to thank you for all the gifts you've given us over these decades, and particularly for this foray into journalism, and ask you to never stop making sense. Thanks so much. Please join me in thanking David.